Victoria, which has recorded 180 new cases of coronavirus and a further 13 deaths in the last 24 hours. It is a slight rise on yesterday's figures, but just the second time in more than 5 weeks that numbers have dropped below 200. Reporter Stephen Schubert is in Melbourne. So, Stephen, just take us through these latest figures there for Victoria.
Good afternoon, Miriam. As you mentioned, 182 new cases of coronavirus recorded in the last 24 hours, including 13 deaths, sadly. Now, I can tell you that of those deaths, it was one man in his 50s, a woman in her 70s, and the other fatalities were in their 80s and 90s. Now, there's 1,689 active cases in aged care homes across Victoria as the problems in that sector continue to manifest, and that's across 129 outbreaks. And in disability care, there's 63 cases, 50 of which are staff. Now, yesterday there were 179 new cases of coronavirus and 9 deaths. Now, that was the first time in more than 5 weeks. It was the 13th of July since we last had a new case number that started with a 1. So good news as that trends down, and I can tell you that the 7-day average at the moment on my calculations is 229. That compares to 328 a week ago. This, of course, is good news, but we know that this isn't over yet. Let's have a listen to our Chief Health Officer, Brett Sutton.
It's great to see 2 days in a row under 200. Certainly we're trending down. That is showing up in the stabilisation in our hospital figures as well. We've got a decrease in the hospitalised number of patients, a decrease in the number in ICU and even ventilated. So the overall trend is positive. Next week, if we carry on like this, we'll see numbers below 150. But it is these simple measures, the ones that we've shown just now, that are really critical to ensure that we continue on that pathway.
Brett Sutton there. Now, Stephen, what is the situation now for regional Victoria?
As we know, they're on stage 3 lockdowns, which is a little bit looser than what we are experiencing here in Melbourne. And the Premier and the Chief Health Officer have been keeping a very close eye on regional case numbers. They had been trending upwards. We saw large numbers in Geelong and other major regional centres. I can tell you now there's 247 active cases today in regional Victoria, including 98 in Geelong, 25 in Bendigo and only 4 in Ballarat. And the Premier, Daniel Andrews, says that those reductions are very promising. Let's have a listen.
In terms of those active cases, particularly as it relates to regional Victoria, this has been something we've been quite focused on. You would remember we were up over 500 active cases not very long ago. I'm happy to report that now there are 247 active cases across local government areas in regional Victoria that are covered by stage 3.
That's the Premier, Daniel Andrews. So, Stephen, what's the verdict at the moment on how Victorians are observing those restrictions? Are they following the rules?
Well, of course, there are always some people who won't do the right thing. And the latest from Victoria Police is they've issued 161 fines in the last 24 hours, 24 for failing to wear a face mask and 13 at vehicle checkpoints and 58 for breaching the curfew, which is now in place across Melbourne. Now, some examples are one man who was on a train bound for Mernda who was not wearing a mask and stated he refused to do so because his solicitor told him to do so. Another man was walking near Flinders Street Station in Melbourne CBD and he said that he'd been at a friend's house in Epping, which is well more than 5 kilometres from the CBD. He told police that he just simply doesn't believe in restrictions. And another woman said that she had already been breached, had already been fined for breaching restrictions, but she was on her way to visit a friend. So still plenty of examples of people not following the rules. They will, however, be slapped with some pretty hefty fines. Miriam.
Our reporter Stephen Schubert there with all the latest from Melbourne. To New South Wales, which has today recorded 9 new cases of coronavirus. 30,810 tests were taken across the state in the past 24 hours. Authorities are still trying to find the source of 2 of those infections. The rest have been traced to known cases and clusters. Also, a case notified after the reporting period worked as a security guard at the Sydney Harbour Marriott Hotel while operating as a quarantine facility for overseas returned travellers. This is the second Marriott Hotel security guard to test positive. Southeast Queensland is facing new coronavirus restrictions after the state recorded 9 new cases overnight. 6 of those are linked to a cluster at the Brisbane Youth Detention Centre. We're joined now by reporter Jessica Rendell in Brisbane. So, Jessica, just tell us about what we know with these new cases.
That's right, Miriam. So 6 new cases here linked to the Brisbane Youth Detention Centre, which brings that cluster to 7. Now, 4 of those 6 new cases are workers at the centre, and the other 2 new cases are close contacts of those workers. Now, one of those workers is also a contractor with QBuild, and he's been working on some upgrades at the Springwood State High School there. Now, his wife has also tested positive, and the couple lives in the suburb of Carindale. Another male worker who tested positive also worked at the North Ipswich Disability Accommodation Centre, and a relative of his has also tested positive as well, and that relative attended the Ipswich Hospital. 2 of the other workers who tested positive, one is from the Brisbane suburb of Marsden and another from Forest Lake. So authorities are warning anybody who may have been in any of those areas and are experiencing symptoms to please come forward and get tested. Here's what the Premier had to say earlier.
We are concerned about the now total of 7 positive cases linked to the youth detention cluster. We are concerned about this cluster because people have been out and about in the community. This is a very important time, especially over the next couple of days, and of course we do expect there could be even more cases linked to this cluster.
Anastasia Palaszczuk there. Jessica, just what are the new restrictions that have come into place?
Some tough new restrictions in place for Queenslanders here today. So indoor and outdoor gatherings have been limited to 10 people in the areas of Logan, Brisbane, Ipswich, the Scenic Rim, the Lockyer Valley, Moreton and Redlands areas as well. Anywhere outside of those regions are limited to 30 people indoor and outdoor. Now, there are some exemptions to that rule. So any venue that has a COVID-safe plan does not need to follow that 30 or 10-person rule. So if you had a wedding planned for this weekend, if your venue has a COVID-safe plan in place, you're still fine to go ahead with that with more than 10 or 30 people. Now, sports are also exempt, community sport, and as well as some other outdoor venues and stuff, as well as if you have a COVID-safe plan, in place. Now, there have been 3 new cases on a cargo ship just off of Townsville. They've been taken to the Townsville Hospital, but the Premier says she isn't concerned about those cases. Miriam?
Our reporter Jessica Rendell there in Brisbane.